Hey, oh boy, welcome to this bonus MXtra here on patreon.com/music is not a genre. I'm opening up with that because I guarantee you this is one of the bonuses I will absolutely be sharing into the world and sooner than later. But you here at Patreon get it first, at least a week early, if not weeks and months earlier. Although in this case, probably about a week or two earlier. And it's a fun one. And it's one I've been meaning to do for a couple of years now. And it is closer to an actual episode than most of my bonus episodes. And it's one, that I think you're going to enjoy because, as promised, I will be delving into Germany and its influence on Western music. So the main episode was music from other countries, and I did mention Germany there. But I also mentioned, and I've discovered through my listening and research and blah, 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 that Germany is far more important developmentally to Western music than any of us know. Vastly larger influence than any of us realize. So I'm going to start with a brief prehistory, classical era, etc. And then I'm going to go from the 1930s up until today. And let me say, I'm talking about music made in Germany by Germans and not German-American music, etc., etc. Sort of like how Danny Boy was, I think, written in America by an Irish-American or whatever. It's not really Irish music, although now it sort of is. And I'm doing this again because I noticed in a lot of my research and listening how often artists either referred to German music, were influenced by it, or actually went there to record because of its influence. And then after we go through the history, I'm going to talk about some of those artists. So the prehistory. You can go back as far as the 17 and 1800s and cite what are called the German stem of classical composers, like the three Bs, Bach, Beethoven, Brahms, as well as Handel, Pachelbel, Mozart, Wagner, Schumann, Strauss, Mendelssohn, Telemann, Weber. Their compositions greatly influenced Western composers and Western classical music in general, and in some cases still do. But you can go even further back, because before all of them, there was Hildegard of Bingen, in the 12th century, who took the stricter discipline of Gregorian chant and expanded its range, its dynamism, and overall expression. This is to illustrate two things. One, Germany's been an influence for a really long time. And two, like Hildegard and those composers, so much of German music has been at the forefront of change and innovation. So let's get into the modern history. And that is, in all the threads above, you can already see that main theme, which is modernism. Why has Germany been so consistently influential? They've tended toward modernism, toward change. Every step of the way, its music creators have set out to advance what came before, not just repeat it. And not just as a natural evolution, but pushing boundaries. Finding the thing that hadn't been done yet for its time and doing that. German music creators have been at the forefront of change forever. Germany's influence on Western music is deeper and stranger and more foundational than most people realize. Frequently absorbed so fully that that's why we don't realize that Germany has had so much influence. German music challenges systems, challenges philosophies, challenges what the future could be. So starting in the 1930s and 40s, modernism, that first kind of tinge of it was starting a little bit before that. The break with romanticism, the key influence is that European modernism created dissonant sounds, etc. Germany and German-speaking Europe was central to the collapse of the Romantic era. Musical thinking that everything needed to be lyrical and consonant and all of that stuff. Core ideas, music as architecture, not storytelling, really getting into almost the mathematics of music, which of course Bach did, in his own way. So that's been around. Sound was as the material, not as expression. Now, it was expression. But when you think about some of those dissonant, German modernist composers, you understand why it was seen more as material. And systems and rules became creative sparks as opposed to restrictions. And you could think of people like Paul Hindemith, who reframed harmony as a functional system rather than as an emotional tradition, which is pretty important because we all still think of harmony as an emotional tradition. When we think of certain chord changes evoke certain moods, etc. Major keys, minor keys. And they were kind of trying to level the playing field, like kind of reinvent all that, deconstruct it, and then reconstruct it. Kurt Weill, pre-exile, sharp, unsentimental, socially aware music. When you think of Threepenny Opera, Mac the Knife, it fed cabaret theater and art pop traditions in a freaking huge way. In fact, I would say a lot of that strain of music would not be what it is without Kurt Weill. When you think of some of the non-German artists that this era influenced, Leonard Bernstein, theatrical, realist, Tom Waits, the grotesque, cabaret grotesquerie, David Bowie, of course, of the Weimar era decadence as an aesthetic stance, and of course, Bowie's work in Germany. All of this helped introduce the idea that music can be cold, designed, even ironic, but still powerful. It didn't need to be romantic. Again, into the next era, the 1950s and 60s, electronic music is born. It's nascent, but it's born. And the moment was elektronische Musik. Germany invents electronic music as a formal discipline. For example, the WDR Studio for Electronic Music in Cologne was the world's first electronic music studio. So this is the era when that would influence the more following eras than this era itself. When you think about any electronic music that was kind of bubbling up in the 70s and then all of the 80s, you can start to see why I am saying that Germany was such a huge influence, because it really is where it started, where the idea of functionally using electronics for music started. You can think of Karl-Heinz Stockhausen, who treated sound as spatial, modular, abstract. Herbert Eimert, who codified electronic composition. And Germany was trying to work with things like non-human rhythms, which I talked about in the 80s episode last week. Sound divorced from performance. So very much not quite musique concrète, because that's French and it has a different angle and tenor and lean. But that idea of sound didn't need to be part of some amazing performance, that it was part of the landscape of the composition, and that you could compose without instruments. Influence on the non-German artists, the Beatles, like Tomorrow Never Knows. That's a Stockhausen thing. Brian Eno and that kind of ambient music philosophy, sound as a function in and of itself. Aphex Twin, sound as object thinking. And then Radiohead, using the studio as compositional space. Radiohead would not exist as they have been for the last 25 years without German music. And this era, the 50s and 60s, is the conceptual root of all electronic, ambient, experimental music, even more so, and like equally so, all music done in digital audio workstations, which is 99.999% of all music in the last how many years? You tell me. Next era, late 1960s to 70s, krautrock, reinvention of rhythm. Now, krautrock, so you may have thought when I started this bonus that I was going to start here. Because I mentioned in the main episode Kahn and Neu, Kraftwerk, and I'll mention a couple of others. Because that's when, at least as far as our consciousness, we understand the concrete impact that German music has had on the world. Kraftwerk was post-punk, was new wave, was hip-hop, like things like that. And I didn't start here because, again, I'm showing you that Germany has been influential long before this. But this is really the big era to me when it was at its peak influence. Core innovations, motorized rhythm, steady, hypnotic, non-swinging, very robotic, repetition more than climax, which they say music can be assigned a traditional gender norm. If music has climaxes, it's usually more male. If it has longer stretched out, denouement and like those kind of feelings bubbling, it's more female. Now, again, that's cliche, but the point is this music had more repetition than climax, which was a big thing at the time. and leading it into, or came from and led to more minimalism and ambient music and stuff like that. The groove and the sound was more important than having amazing chops and virtuosity. Some of those seminal artists, again, Kahn, Neu, Kraftwerk, Faust, Amandul II, I guess, and Tangerine Dream is another big one, actually. Germany helped reshape rock music apart from the blues tradition and the country tradition. It helped make rhythm more machine-like, which helped foster things like disco and house and techno and EDM and pretty much all of today's music. And that albums could be immersive, although they didn't, invent that, but they could be immersive sonically, let's say. Think of David Bowie's Berlin Trilogy, Talking Heads, Joy Division, all of New Romantic, New Wave, Stereolab, LCD Sound System, even Wilco and Radiohead. Krautrock became the hidden backbone of post-punk, indie, new wave, ambient, electronic rock, hybrids, and quite a bit of hip-hop, too. 1970s and the 80s, the blueprint for the future. Again, possibly the most influential band in modern music is Beatles? No. It's Kraftwerk. As far as sound. Electronic pop could be human. Minimalism could be big. It doesn't sound like it makes sense, but if you know what I'm talking, like a New Order. Minimalist, but still big. The machine as the aesthetic itself. Synth pop and electro and techno and house and hip hop and new wave and new romantic, again, all directly shaped by this. And you think of Africa Bambaata's Planet Rock. That was Kraftwerk. That was a Kraftwerk lick that they redid. Think of Depeche Mode, New Order, Daft Punk. Think of Coldplay with their minimalism in their later era. Think of Radiohead. Think of Kanye West, even if you need to. Minimalism and repetition. Think of Detroit techno, think of house, but techno in particular names Kraftwerk as foundational. Then you get into the 1980s later, cold emotion, hard edges, new futures. The US and the UK were getting big, bombastic 80s. I talked about that last week. Germany was pushing emotional restraint, mechanical precision, futurism without nostalgia. Key artists, Einstürzende Neubauten, industrial music as physical violence, and DAF, Deutsch-Amerikanische Freundschaft, proto-EDM, and Klaus Schulze, long-form electronic immersion. So very different artists, but all very influential. They helped and shape industrial, EBM, dark wave, techno, post-industrial ambient, and influenced people like Nine Inch Nails, Ministry, Depeche Mode, Pop Will Eat Itself, Trent Reznor himself, Coil. Germany showed that music could be uncomfortable instead of cathartic and still be very desirable and effective. 1990s, you had techno, minimalism, and club culture as after the wall fell in Berlin. So Germany becomes ground zero for modern electronic culture. You had Berlin techno, minimal techno, experimental club music. Some of those artists from that era, Basic Channel, Ellen Allien, Westbaum, Paul van Dyk. Germany contributes that clubs were hugely important as cultural institutions. DJs could be artists and composers. Repetition could create transcendence. Think of raves. Influence on many non-German artists such as the Chemical Brothers, but also Richie Houghton, Underworld, Burrier, Floating Points, modern EDM, ambient techno, any experimental club music. You can blame 90s Germany for that and prior. 2000s to the present, systems thinking everywhere. Germany's influence, it's all everywhere now, so nobody really realizes how influential Germany is because all of modern music it owes its thanks in structure and in the way it's produced and sound and etc. to Germany. Precision in production aesthetics, quantization and pitch and all that. Minimalism as an emotional language. You hear that a lot. Genre blind sound design, so throw in what works despite where it comes from. Thinking of the studio as an instrument. Some modern non-German artists shaped by this. Again, Radiohead and Kanye. One Tricks, Point Never. James Blake, FK Twigs, Arca, and again, hundreds of others. they aren't copying German music because they're not even necessarily aware that that's where they get this influence from. They are using German ways of thinking about music. So, some conclusions. Germany doesn't just contribute styles, it contributes frameworks and philosophies and ways of thinking. It teaches Western music. Blues doesn't have to be a part of rock. Live instruments don't have to be a part of rock. Performers themselves don't have to be a part of rock or music. You don't need emotion to create meaning, or bombast or drama to create meaning. Repetition can be cathartic and radical, and machines themselves can be expressive. If you think of American music constantly inventing new feelings, and British music inventing new attitudes, German music has always invented new possibilities, new futures. And here are some artists who created seminal work in Germany itself and why. So over the last half century, Germany, and Berlin in particular, has functioned less like a scene and more like a reset button for artists, especially ones at a creative crossroads. Musicians don't go there to chase trends, they go to shed habits, dismantle identities, rebuild their sound from first principles, kind of rediscover. Germany as a creative exile. So for Western artists, Germany has represented distance from pressure, distance from the monoliths of the Western world's Anglo-American music industry and things that they say you need to do. A place to go to experiment, a place that's kind of strange or cold and unfinished, especially post war and post Berlin Wall, which allowed artists to feel the same way. It's expected to be different there. So you think of course, the Beatles and other bands, but the Beatles in particular, getting their chops in Germany. It gave them the freedom to try different things, working as many hours as they did per night, and to see what worked and what didn't. It was a safe space in its way. You think of Bowie's Berlin trilogy, Low, Heroes, and Lodger, of which Lodger is my favorite. I know that's controversial. It was austere. It stripped away all the glam rock excess. It stripped away a lot of the funk, frankly. It was experimental in its way. It was close to influenced by Neu and Kraftwerk and all that stuff. Modernism in general. Hansa Studios is very important in this scene, sitting right beside the wall. Result: fragmented song structures, instrumentals treated as part of the emotional narrative, and the studio became part of the compositional, creation. U2's Achtung Baby in 1991. Again, they were blocked. They didn't know what to do. They took Bowie's cue and went to Germany, and maybe the Beatles, but especially Bowie, and did it because they wanted to strip away what they had done and reinvent themselves. It offered moral ambiguity after the wall fell, a collapse of the clear narratives that U2 had set forth before, a break from that stadium rock. And they recorded most of it in Berlin, some of it in Dublin and elsewhere. It helped introduce industrial textures and loops and irony into U2's music, which really they would have just been an 80s band if not for this album, because that gave them new life to continue their success through the 90s and 2000s and beyond. It questioned even the idea of sincerity. Didn't abandon it, but questioned it. Gave it nuance. It turned earnestness into self-awareness. You think of The Fly or the Mephisto and all that. Germany gave U2 permission to allow themselves to doubt what they had been to create something new. Iggy Pop went there with Bowie, directly influenced people like Joy Division, post-punk industrial aesthetics. Depeche Mode repeatedly were drawn to Berlin in the 80s and 90s. It gave them the seriousness and weight that they needed to do the kind of music they wanted to do, a darker, more adult palette, more adult emotions than Speak and Spell, let's say. They evolved from kind of that poppy synth pop to more dark electro techno. And Germany was a big part of that. Nick Cave got more severe. It reduced his romanticism when he went to Germany, increased his menace and his focus. It became more moral drama than gothic excess, refining his intensity. Why does Germany keep pulling artists in? It's a culture that values systems over style. Don't worry about how you sound. Don't worry about how you're supposed to sound. Use a certain system or a deconstruction to create different structures, a different process, and thinking more philosophically and existentially and long term. The studio is a laboratory. From Hansa and on, rooms are designed for atmospherics. Silence is okay. Repetition is okay. Being abrasive is okay. Take your time and get it right. Psychological distance, emotional detachment, reducing the instinct to perform all of the time. Just kind of sit in it and be. Let ideas fail, which is not, is something that needs to be done in the discovery of great stuff. The pattern, why do artists tend to go to Germany? To kill a persona or the sound that they had, to escape success, to relearn what they already know, but in a different way, in a different context, with a different perspective, to replace all of the strictures that they had on themselves with the curiosity of discovering new things. Germany is not a place artists go to find themselves. It's where they go to lose themselves, to deconstruct, to reconstruct, to reinvent. And unlike every other Bonus MxTRA, this is a special one because it has an actual featured song. I'm going to include a featured song because it's too perfect. It's one done with my old Ape Cafe partner, Pete Bradis, which get well, Pete, for a new band he put together a while back called BONUS MxTRA. It's called Komputers and Kognac, computers with a K, and features Pete's composition and playing and backup vocals, co-production with another guy whose name I sadly forget, and I am on vocals. And it's a loving parody of German techno. And honestly, it's pretty much all I need to say about it. You're going to laugh, you're going to love it, you're going to understand why it's so German. Komputers and Kognac. It is featured on the album It Wasn't Me, which means it's streaming everywhere. So please click the link to stream it, playlist it, share it. But you can also hear it in about 5 seconds. Thanks for hanging with me for this Bonus MxTRA, and especially you out there, patreon.com/musicisnotagenre. Come support for as little as $1 a month. Stay tuned for the song, and I will talk to you next week.
In Minsk, they do it in Berlin, and they do it in Prague. Komputers and Kognac. Komputers and Kognac. Komputers and Kognac. We are electrons and electrons. Humanity is a facade. In this digital age, with a useless